Hello, my name is Raven. I use they, she pronouns, and welcome back to our Dice Throne Hero Spotlight series where we look at every playable hero in the Dice Throne series, where we're going from Season 1 through to the rest of them, looking at each hero, talking about how they play, looking at their board, their leaflet, their cards, and today we are looking at the Pyromancer, quite an aggressive hero, a little bit different to what we had with our previous two heroes. But let's open up the box and see what we've got. All right, here we have the Pyromancer. They are a level 3 complexity hero, and as we'll see, they are very aggressive. Very aggressive. They do not know the meaning of back down or stop or defense. They just keep going. And we will see exactly what I mean when I'm saying that as we look at their different abilities here. So let's start over on her leaflet. So up the top here we have Knockdown, a negative status effect with a stack limit of 1. When someone has this, they have to spend 2 combat points before the start of their offensive roll phase, but if they don't, they skip their offensive roll phase. So either they're spending 2 combat points or they're skipping their offensive roll phase. Either way, the token gets removed. But yeah, this basically removes 2 combat points from a person, but in the rare cases where just someone has no combat points, doesn't have any cards, it can be quite brutal just losing that offensive roll phase, which is basically something you never want to have happen. Next here we have Burn, also a negative status effect with a stack limit of 1. If you have this during your upkeep phase, you take 2 damage and it sticks around, it's persistent. This is a very strong ability, just getting 2 damage every single turn reliably. You can't have multiple of these, but it's still very strong. So getting this early in the game is very good for the Pyromancer. Next, we have Fire Mastery, which can be a little bit confusing. It's a positive status effect. It has a stack limit of 5, which is quite a bit. It says a player with this token must cool off during their upkeep phase by removing 1 token. So it doesn't have any abilities by itself, but as it says in the brackets there, Fire Mastery increases the power of various abilities. So there's abilities on the Pyromancer's board that will benefit from us having Fire Mastery. And then lastly, we have Stun, which we should remember from the Barbarian. But if you didn't see that video, I'll go through it again. It's a negative status effect that is quite strong. It has a stack limit of 1. And if someone has this status effects, they can take no actions of any kind whatsoever, kind of similar to what's happening in response to a ultimate ability. And when the attack finishes against them, the player who inflicted stun removes the token and immediately targets that same opponent with an additional offensive roll phase. So they get to go again straight away, which is very strong. All right, so those are our different status effects that we have. It's also worth noting here that the Pyromancer is our first hero that has 4 different symbols on their dice. So 1, 2, 3 is flame, 4 is blaze, 5 is fiery soul, and 6 is meteor. So that does mean it can be a little bit more tricky to hit some of their abilities. So let's have a look at what those abilities are. So first off, we have the basic ability, Fireball. 3 flames deal 4, 4 flames deal 6, 5 flames deal 8, and regardless of which one you activate, you gain 1 Fire Mastery. And remember, you're losing 1 of those every upkeep. So this is fine. This is a fairly standard amount of damage for a basic ability. As usual, you don't usually want to be activating this unless you don't have other options. The upgrade for it doesn't do much. It costs 1 combat point and just means you gain 2 fire mastery instead of 1. Again, usually this isn't something that you want to be worrying about. You probably want to be focusing on other things. Next, we have Burning Soul, where you need 2 fiery souls to activate it, and you gain 2 fire mastery for each fiery soul symbol you've rolled. And you deal 1 collateral damage for each fiery soul symbol you've rolled to all opponents. And this is the first time we've seen collateral damage. Now, collateral damage is a little bit interesting. If you're in 1v1 format, collateral damage won't really matter too much, because essentially in 1v1 it's basically the same as undefendable damage for the most part. But if you're in a format where you're playing with more people, with 3 people, with 4 people, whether that's in teams or King of the Hill, then collateral damage is being dealt, as this says, to all opponents. But it's also not something that you can add to the damage of, and it's not something that people can roll defense against either. So it's quite interesting thing that she's playing around with, and this is also a good way for Pyromancer to be gaining that fire mastery. But it is quite a small amount of damage. It could be up to 5, but then you would have to roll 5 on all of your dice to be able to do that 5 damage. All right, but it does have an upgrade. We have Burning Soul 2. So you only need 2 symbols to activate it, but if you do happen to have 3 symbols, you also inflict burn. And on 4 symbols, you increase your fire mastery stack limit by 1. So instead of being a stack limit of 5, it becomes a stack limit of 6 or 7 or 8. It just keeps going up. And again, you gain 2, and the rest is the same. And that's only 1 combat point to upgrade that. So that is certainly worth doing if you've got the combat points spare, because inflicting burn is very strong, and being able to increase that stack limit if you do get a lot of those 5s is very nice. Next, down here we have Pyroblast. So 3 flames and a meteor, so you need 1 6 for this. And then you deal 6 damage to start off with and roll 1 dice. On a flame, you add 3 damage. On a blaze, you add inflict burn. On a fiery soul, you gain 2 fire mastery. And on a meteor, you inflict knockdown. So this attack could be 9 damage, just straight up 9 damage, which is fairly nice. It could be 6 damage and burn, could be 6 damage and 2 fire mastery, could be 6 damage and knockdown. Honestly, most of the time, I feel like you want one of those first 2 options, being able to just do 9 damage or being able to inflict burn, particularly early on. Again, is really nice. But fire mastery and knockdown are also quite lovely as well. Now we actually have 2 upgrades for this one here. So our first upgrade costs us 2 combat points, and instead of rolling 1 dice, we are now rolling 2 dice. And these are mostly the same, but now for every flame, we add 3 damage, and for every fiery soul, we gain 2 fire mastery. We can still only inflict 1 burn and only 1 knockdown, because those both have a stack limit of 1. But this is quite a nice upgrade. Being able to roll 2 dice here is quite lovely. And we also have a second upgrade, Pyroblast 3. So that's 1 additional combat point, so 3 in total. And this just means that we can re-roll 1 of the dice, which is sort of nice. Being able to have that option and being able to get more particular about what result we want, if there's a particular thing that you're looking for here. But yeah, either at Pyroblast 2 or 3, you can be dealing up to 12 damage with this, or gaining up to 4 fire mastery with this ability, which is quite nice. Then over here we have combustion. So all 4 symbols, so you have to have a 4, 5, 6, and then either a 1 or a 2 or a 3. You gain 1 fire mastery. Then remove up to 4 fire mastery tokens and deal 3 undefendable damage per token removed. Now this is probably one of the Pyromaster's Pyromancer's stronger abilities. And honestly, the one that I think most people are more scared of a lot of the time, and is often why you want to try and remove Fire Mastery if you've got the chance to do so with the Watt status effects and things like that, so that they're not able to activate this ability, because that is 12 undefendable damage if they have the 4 Fire Mastery tokens there. If you don't have like any Fire Mastery tokens to start off with, you really don't want to be activating this ability. You don't want to be dealing only 3 undefendable damage. You want to be doing at least 9, preferably the full 12 for this ability. And it does in fact have an upgrade for 2 combat points where you're dealing 4 undefendable damage per token you remove. So that becomes 16 undefendable damage if you're doing all 4 tokens here, which is very strong and very scary for your opponent. Definitely a upgrade worth getting if you can. Next, let's move on to our straights. Our small straight hot streak. Gain 2 Fire Mastery, then deal 5 damage plus 1 damage per Fire Mastery you have. So it'll also always be a minimum of 7, because you're gaining 2 Fire Mastery from the ability itself. But it could be up to, say, 10 if your stack limit is at 5, though it could be more if you've increased your stack limit in other ways. But yeah, so at least 7, could be more, which is a reasonable amount of damage for a small straight. But we do have an upgrade for this ability. So we have Hot Streak 2, which costs us 2 combat points, which deals 6 damage plus 1 damage per Fire Mastery, which is all right. So it's dealing at least 8 and could be up to 11 or 12, depending on what our stack limit is looking like. But then it also gives us this ability, Scorch, which needs 2 flames and 2 blazes, and you gain 2 Fire Mastery, inflict burn, and deal 6 damage. And this is quite a nice option, because without this ability, there aren't really any abilities that use that blaze symbol except for Combustion there, which uses a single one of them. So having an option if you do roll multiple 4s is quite nice, and having another way to inflict burn is also very nice. Then we have our large straight ability. Gain 2 Fire Mastery, then deal 4 damage plus 2 damage per Fire Mastery. So this will be dealing a minimum of 8 because you're gaining that 2 Fire Mastery from this Ignite ability. But if you've got the full stack limit of 5 tokens, that could be 14 damage. And if you've found ways to increase your stack limit, then that could be even more potentially. And certainly, if you've got the upgrade, which costs us 2 combat points, Ignite 2, gain 2 Fire Mastery, inflict burn, then deal 5 damage plus 2 per Fire Mastery. So it's only dealing 1 extra damage, but it's also inflicting burn, which again is really lovely. So that's quite nice. And then it also gives us this additional ability of Blazing Soul. 2 blazes, 2 fiery souls, increase Fire Mastery stack limit by 1, then gain 5 Fire Mastery and inflict knockdown. So this one isn't dealing any damage, which is somewhat annoying, but it is another way to increase that stack limit, is another way to gain a lot of Fire Mastery very quickly, and inflicting knockdown is nice as well. And so this is another option if you're getting lots of those 4s and 5s, just a fallback to go on to. So similar to that, Scorch is quite nice to have. Probably other things that you want to be doing, but if you do it, is still quite useful, just obviously not dealing damage as you usually want to be doing as the Pyromancer. Then we have our 4/6's ability, Meteorite. Gain 2 Fire Mastery, inflict stun. There's that stun we were talking about. Then deal 1 undefendable damage per Fire Mastery, Additionally, deal 2 collateral damage to all opponents. So this could be a relatively small amount of damage, potentially, actually. So if you don't have any Fire Mastery to start off with, it's only going to be 2 undefendable damage plus that 2 collateral damage, meaning 4 damage. If you've got more opponents, then obviously 2 to each of those other opponents as well. But you are inflicting stuns, so that does mean you are getting an additional attack against that person, which is quite strong. And of course, if you do have your full stack limit of Fire Mastery, that could be 5 undefendable damage plus the 2 collateral damage, putting it up to 7 damage, which is quite lovely. Then our upgrade, Meteorite 2, which costs us 2 combat points. Still just gives us 2 Fire Mastery and inflicts stun, still just does 1 undefendable damage, but you do 3 collateral damage to all opponents. It's a fairly small difference, and really that doesn't matter too much unless you have that multiple opponents that you're going to be dealing the damage to. So I feel like that upgrade isn't too much worth it for just that, but you do also, of course, get the 3/6's ability, Meteoroid, where you inflict knockdown, burn, and stun, which is in itself is quite strong. Even though you're not dealing any damage, inflicting burn, inflicting stun, and knockdown, just for the fun of it as well, can still be quite strong. Then we have our defensive ability, rolling 5 dice from the start, gain a Fire Mastery for each Fiery Soul that we roll, and deal 1 damage for each flame that we roll. So there's no actual defense here. It's a defense ability, but we're only hitting back. There's no way to prevent damage for the Pyromancer. We do have an upgrade of the Molten Armor ability, which costs us 1 combat point for Molten Armor 2. Here the only addition is on a flame plus a blaze, we inflict burn. So we can inflict burn with our defensive ability. And then there is a second upgrade, so Molten Armor 3, which costs us an additional 2 combat points for a total of 3. Where we also gain a Fire Mastery on each 6 we roll, and we also do a damage on each 6 we roll. Otherwise, 6s weren't doing anything in our defense roll before. So that can be quite strong. Certainly, that first defense upgrade is very much worth it. Being able to inflict burn on defense is very nice. But getting more damage and more Fire Mastery with your defense roll is very lovely as well if you've got the combat points to spare. And then we have, of course, our ultimate ability, Scorch the Earth. 5/6s, gain 3 Fire Mastery, inflict knockdown and burn, deal 12 damage, additionally deal 2 collateral damage to all opponents. So that's 14 damage in a 1v1 scenario, and more, of course, if you've got more opponents. So that's a very nice ability there. So, like, out of these abilities, as you can see, it's very aggressive sort of nature that we're having here. A lot of the time, you're going to be wanting to build up that Fire Mastery quickly if you can, perhaps with an early Burning Soul, and then going into your Combustion ability so you can get that large amounts of undefendable damage. But you can also get bits of Fire Mastery through the Straits ability here, or occasionally through Pyroblast as well. So that's often where kind of the pattern that you want to be sort of doing with the Pyromancer is gaining that Fire Mastery and then using it for Combustion, and then gaining that Fire Mastery and then using it for Combustion again, is very strong and difficult to deal with because that's undefendable damage. And so there's not a lot that many characters are able to do about that. But then we also have our cards. So let's have a look at the Pyromancer's unique cards. So we have a promo card. As usual, 0 combat points, roll a dice. On a 6, you gain max Fire Mastery. So you gain up to your stack limit, whatever that might be. And on any other outcome, draw a card. This is quite nice. In the instance that you do get a 6, that is absolutely lovely. but just drawing the card is also quite nice as well, because Pyromancer doesn't really have any extra ways to be doing that. Then we have Fire Up, 3 combat points. To increase your Fire Mastery stack limit by 1, then gain 2 Fire Mastery. So this is an additional way to be gaining that, increasing that stack limit, as well as the Blazing Soul that we had over here, or the Burning Soul that we had over here, both upgrades. But it is a little bit expensive. So 3 combat points is a fair amount when you don't have additional ways to be gaining them. Then we have Warm Up, which is a free main phase free main phase card. You gain 1 Fire Mastery, then you spend any amount of combat points and gain 1 extra Fire Mastery for each combat point you spend. So this can be just a free Fire Mastery, or you can convert your combat points into Fire Mastery, which can be quite nice if you're just needing that Fire Mastery right now to be able to activate that combustion ability, or whatever it might be. If someone's just done a what status effect on you, maybe that's what you really need. Then we have Red Hot, an attack modifier, roll phase action, add 1 damage per Fire Mastery. So that could be up to an additional 5 damage. Obviously, you can... you need to time it right. If you're going to pair this with combustion, you'll need to play this before removing the Fire Mastery tokens, because obviously then it won't actually add any damage. But yes, obviously it still works plenty well with many of your other offensive abilities. Then we have Huzzah, which is very British. 1 combat point, attack modifier, roll a dice. On a flame, add 3 damage. On a blaze, inflict burn. On a fiery soul, gain 2 Fire Mastery. And on a meteor, inflict knockdown. So that's just a nice little bonus and feels almost, it's pretty much identical to what we had over here with Pyroblast. Pretty much identical to what's happening there. So adding 3 damage, inflicting burn, gaining 2 Fire Mastery, or inflicting knockdown. Pretty much exactly identical to what's happening there. So that's just a nice little bonus on top of whatever attack it is that you might be doing. But yeah, that's the Pyromancer. So as you can see, very offensive, not much in the way of defense whatsoever, but dealing a lot of damage, dealing potentially large amounts of undefendable damage with that combustion ability, and potentially being able to inflict stun and get multiple combats happening, which can be quite strong. All right, that was the Pyromancer. As you can see, quite an aggressive hero, doing a lot of damage and a fair amount of undefendable damage as well. And then also having access to that stun ability, which is quite powerful, as well as burn as a way to be doing reliable damage every turn. But there's also some downsides as well. As we noted, there isn't really any sort of defense ability, any way to mitigate damage, which is a bit of a trade-off there for the amount of damage that they're able to deal. And similar to the Barbarian and the Moon Elf, don't really have additional ways to be drawing cards or gaining combat points. So yeah, some positives, some negatives, as there are with every hero. But yeah, what are your thoughts? Is this a playstyle that you think that you would enjoy? I know I certainly have friends who very much enjoy the Pyromancer and other friends who very much fear the Pyromancer. They can do quite a lot of damage. I'm interested to hear what your experiences have been with them down in the comments below. Let me know if you've played with her before or played against her before, and how you've found that, what you've found effective in the times that you've played with her. But that will be it for us today, and I hope you tune in next time to hear us talk about the Shadow Thief. But until then, see you later.